Land Over Sky. Book 1, The Secrets of Cloudspire, by John Rojas. Chapter 1, Sunlight and Shadows. The Cloudspire ruins loomed over the grassy expanse of the plateau like a colossal stone table, casting long shifting shadows across the emerald plain below. Perched atop the ancient platform was a ghostly city, held aloft by towering, time-worn pillars that reached hundreds of feet into the sky. Many of these pillars had crumbled over the centuries, leaving massive cracked segments scattered across the grasslands like the fallen bones of giants. The city above, though faded and weathered, still hinted at the grand designs of the skyfolk. Delicate arches, towering spires, and sweeping columned halls now overgrown with ivy and wildflowers, their former glory left to the whispers of the wind. The platform, riddled with holes, seemed as though time itself had worn it away. Shafts of golden sunlight pierced through the gaps, casting dappled beams that danced across the greenery below, pools of warmth amidst the cool, shadowed ground. Occasionally, loose stones dislodged from the city above, clattering through the gaps and plummeting to the earth below, where they came to rest like fragments of a broken puzzle, reminders of a bygone age. Beneath the shadow of the ruins, a lone rider crossed the grassy expanse. Milli sat astride her horse, the rhythmic clop of hooves softened by the thick undergrowth. She kept a steady grip on the reins, guiding her mount carefully around the ancient fallen pillars that lay like immense stone slabs upon the ground. Her dark hair caught in the breeze as she glanced up, eyes narrowing against the sunlight as she studied the broken skyline of the city above, framed by the pillars that stretched like the legs of giants toward the heavens. The Cloudspire ruins had captivated her since childhood, an unreachable world of white stone and shadowy archways suspended above her own. From her vantage point below, Milli could see where sections of the platform had collapsed, leaving parts of the ancient city hanging precariously over the edges, as if frozen in a moment of imminent fall. Above, the fragmented city seemed to drift among the clouds, its edges softened by mist, giving it a ghostly, dreamlike quality. It was both majestic and eerie, a place of unreachable legends and stories told by the fireside in the cool evenings of Skyreach Hold. An eagle wheeled overhead, circling beneath the sun, before it let out a cry and vanished through a hole in the great stone ceiling, disappearing beyond sight. She dismounted near a patch of sunlight that broke through a wide gap above, letting her horse graze nearby. As she stretched out on the soft grass, she felt the warmth of the sun soak into her skin, a gentle contrast to the cool air beneath the ruins. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. Many children and farmers had been crushed by falling debris at Cloudspire. He had cautioned time and again, "Stay away, it's dangerous and forbidden." But the danger only made it more alluring, a hidden place she couldn't resist exploring when the chance arose. She knew she was supposed to be back at the village, helping her mother with the daily chores, but those mysterious ruins always seemed to pull her away. Milli closed her eyes and stretched her arms and legs, enjoying the stolen moments of peace under the shade of the ancient city above. That was when she heard a voice, sharp against the soft rustling of the wind. "Heaven," the voice murmured, breaking through her thoughts. Milli opened one green eye, squinting into the sun. The gods live up there. She rolled onto her stomach and spotted the speaker, a tall, scruffy-haired boy standing a few yards away, his gaze fixed on the city above. She hadn't heard him approach. It was Kalen, with eyes that matched her own, full of wonder. He stood in awe of the ancient city hanging above their heads, the light catching in his untamed hair. "Only gods could build a city like that," he added, his voice a mix of reverence and curiosity. Milli propped herself up on her elbows, studying him with a faint smirk. "My father says the skyfolk, our ancestors, built Cloudspire." Kalen chuckled, shifting his gaze from the ruins to her. "Your father doesn't read books. I do." "You read books?" Milli scoffed, flashing a familiar look of disbelief. Kalan Brightfeather, the hunter's son, knows how to read ancient texts. I've heard bigger fibs that were more believable. Kalan feigned a wounded expression, then suddenly broke into a laugh. He walked over and plopped down beside her on the grass, the sun warming their backs as he winked. Read, hunt, and cook. What more could you want in a man? Milli rolled her eyes, but couldn't help a smile. They shared a moment of quiet camaraderie, both gazing up at the sunlit ruins one last time. The ancient city loomed above them, a silent reminder of the world beyond their understanding. As the shadows grew longer, Milli reluctantly pulled herself to her feet, brushing bits of grass from her clothes. Kalan stood too, glancing toward the distant peaks that marked the path back to Skyreach Hold. They knew they had lingered longer than they should have, and the walk back would take time. Together they gathered their things, and with a final glance up at Cloudspire, they began their journey home, the mystery of the ruins hanging in their minds like an unanswered question. Kalan walked beside Milli as they guided her horse through the thick grass, the shadows of the Cloudspire ruins stretching long and cool behind them. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, highlighting the hints of autumn creeping into the leaves of distant trees. "So, is your horse still named Briar?" Kalan asked, his voice light, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips as he glanced over at her. Milli shook her head, a gentle breeze tugging at her dark hair. "No, this one is Willow. Briar was the last one." She stroked the horse's neck affectionately, guiding him along the uneven path. "You're thinking of her brother, the one that was with me last winter." Kalan's expression faltered, and he bit his lip. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up, Milli." "I know how much he meant to you." Milli shrugged, forcing a small smile, though a shadow passed through her green eyes. "It's okay, Kalan. It's just how things are out here. Sometimes they don't make it through the cold, no matter how hard you try to help." She gave Willow a gentle pat, as if to reassure both herself and the horse. They walked in silence for a few moments, the soft crunch of grass underfoot filling the air. Eventually, Kalan cleared his throat, changing the subject. "So, did you hear about the competition in town last week? They're saying Jace Stormholt is the one the elders chose for the trials." Milli's jaw tensed slightly at the name, but she tried to keep her voice light. "Yeah, I heard. Everyone's talking about it. They say he was practically made for piloting the mountain lion through those obstacle courses." Her eyes narrowed a little as she added, "I bet he's already halfway to the league by now, thinking he's the hero of Skyreach Hold." Kalan let out a dry chuckle, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I heard he's got quite the ego. But I have to give him credit. He did beat me fair and square in the strength trials. Didn't think he'd manage to knock me out of the endurance run, though." He ran a hand through his tousled hair, a look of frustration crossing his handsome face, his sharp jawline clenching as he spoke. He was taller than most boys his age, with broad shoulders that made him seem older than his years. His dark hair, always a little messy from the wind, framed a face that carried both the ruggedness of his hunter's life and a certain youthful charm. But there was a flicker of envy behind his grey eyes, one that Milli couldn't miss. Milli gave him a sidelong glance, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "You know, I would have loved to compete, but... well, with my father being so sick, there was no way I could leave him alone for something like that." Kalan's expression softened as he looked at her. "I know, you'd have given Jace a run for his money if you'd been there, I'm sure of it." He offered her a small, sympathetic smile. Milli shrugged, turning her attention back to the path ahead. She was shorter than Kalan, her head barely reaching his shoulder, but her small frame carried a quiet strength. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, and though she tried to hide it, there was a pretty softness to her features that contrasted with the determined gleam in her green eyes. "Well, maybe next time, right?" she said with a wistful sigh, though she knew deep down that opportunities like that didn't come often for people like them. Kaelin glanced over at her horse, then at the uneven terrain they were crossing. He reached out, resting a hand on the bridle. "Here, let me help guide him through this part. These stones look tricky." As he moved closer, their shoulders brushed for a moment, the warmth of his arm against hers, sending a brief, unexpected spark between them. Milli glanced up, catching the hint of a flush in Kaelin's cheeks, before he quickly looked away, his focus shifting back to the horse. She couldn't help but smile at the awkwardness of it, feeling her own cheeks warm a little. They continued in silence, each lost in their thoughts. It wasn't long before they crested a rise, the path leveling out before them. Beyond the next ridge, Skyreach Hold came into view, nestled against the edge of the plateau. The town's stone buildings glimmered in the late afternoon light, reflecting the sun off their weathered white surfaces. Smoke from the chimneys curled lazily into the sky, mingling with the autumn breeze. "Looks like home is just ahead," Kaelin said softly, his voice carrying a trace of reluctance, as if he wasn't quite ready to let this quiet moment end. Milli gave a small nod, her eyes lingering on the distant town before turning back toward the shadowed ruins far behind them. For just a moment, the world felt bigger than it ever had before, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Kaelin and Milli walked in companionable silence for a while, the steady rhythm of Willow's hooves blending with the faint murmur of wind through the grass. The shadows of the distant Cloudspire ruins stretched long and dark behind them as the afternoon sun sank lower in the sky. The air carried the scent of pine and the faint chill of the approaching evening. "You know, it's strange to think about Jace being up north by now," Kaelin said eventually, breaking the silence. "I heard he left with a full escort from the council, like he was already some kind of hero. The elders even gave him a feast the night before he left." Milli huffed a small laugh, the bitterness clear in her tone. "A feast? Of course they would. They've always loved a good show. Our champion, Jace Stormholt, the pride of Skyreach Hold." She mimicked one of the elders' grand voices with a roll of her eyes. "But we both know he's just another one of their favorites, like his father before him." Kaelin glanced over, a smirk playing at his lips despite himself. "He's got a knack for making everyone think he's got it all together. But you should have seen him during the endurance test. He almost fainted halfway through. If I hadn't tripped over my own feet, I might have taken him." Milli grinned, nudging his shoulder playfully. "Always so close, Kaelin. One of these days you'll actually win." "Hey, I've won plenty of things," he protested, though the teasing was gentle. "Just not the things that matter, I guess." He shrugged, his smirk fading as his gaze turned thoughtful. "You know, I still can't believe they only have one mechanican in the whole town, and that it goes to Jace of all people. The mountain lion is the only thing we have that could give us a shot at the trials, and even then it's a long shot. The towns up north probably have dozens of mechanicans by now." Milli's expression softened, and she nodded. "I know, we barely get by out here, but still, sometimes I think we could have done something with that chance if we had it. Oren, Taryn, Mira, you and me. We would have made a good team." She gave a wistful smile, looking up at the orange-tinged sky. "We'd probably crash the first time out, but at least we'd do it together." Kaelin laughed, the sound echoing across the hills. "I can see it now. Oren yelling at us about gears and levers, you trying to keep us from running into a tree, and the twins arguing over who gets to take the first swing. It'd be a disaster, but it'd be our disaster." Milli couldn't help but laugh with him, the warmth of their shared dream chasing away the chill of the coming evening. For a moment, the weight of what they couldn't have seemed lighter. But then, as their laughter faded, the reality of the distance between them and those dreams settled back in. Kaelin kicked at a loose stone on the path, sending it skittering into the grass. "Maybe next year," he said quietly, almost to himself. If they let us try again, maybe. Milli reached out, resting a hand on his arm, her touch light. We'll get our chance, Kaylin. Maybe not the way we hoped, but somehow. Just don't lose hope, okay? Kaylin looked down at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. He placed his hand over hers, offering a small lopsided smile. Yeah, I won't. As they crested the last hill, Skyreach Hold came into full view, nestled against the mountain's edge. The stone walls of the town rose sturdy and strong, built from the same white stone that made up the pillars of Cloudspire. The setting sun painted the buildings in shades of gold and amber, while smoke from the hearths of evening fires rose in gentle spirals into the cool air. From this distance, the town looked almost peaceful, like a storybook picture. But Kaylin and Milli knew the hardships that lived behind those walls, the same hardships that kept their families working from dawn until the stars came out. The worn iron-bound gates of Skyreach Hold loomed ahead as they drew closer, flanked by guards who gave them a nod when they approached. The gates stood open, a faint creak echoing through the dusk as the last of the day's traders returned with their carts of wood, pelts, and dried herbs. A few villagers bustled about, finishing up their work before nightfall, while children chased each other across the narrow streets, their laughter carrying on the wind. Kaylin turned to Milli, his expression softening as he took in the familiar scene. Home sweet home, right? Milli gave a faint smile, glancing back toward the shadowed expanse of Cloudspire behind them before meeting his eyes. Yeah, home. For now. Together they guided Willow through the gates, back into the life they knew, even as the echoes of ancient gears and distant dreams lingered in their minds. Milli pushed open the wooden gate, leading Willow into the small enclosed yard of her family's home. The humble cottage nestled at the edge of Skyreach Hold was built of rough stone, with a sloping roof patched together with timber and thatch. The barn where they kept their horses stood nearby, its weathered boards creaking in the evening breeze. Milli slipped the bridle off Willow, patting his neck, before guiding him into the barn and closing the door behind him. She lingered for a moment, listening to the comforting sounds of the horses settling down, then turned toward the house. The windows glowed softly, casting rectangles of warm light onto the dirt path, and she could see her mother moving inside. With a deep breath, she walked up the steps, the scent of stew drifting through the door as she pushed it open. Inside, the cottage was snug and plain. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, its warmth filling the small room. Her mother, Alara, sat by the bedside, her hands busy dabbing a damp cloth over her father's forehead. Aaron, usually strong and broad-shouldered, looked thinner than Milli remembered, his cheeks hollowed and his skin pale. He had caught a lung fever in the late spring, a sickness that had nearly taken him from them. Now he slept fitfully, his breath still carrying the rasp of illness, but he was on the mend, or so her mother kept insisting. Alara looked up as Milli entered, a tired smile softening her features. She had the same green eyes as her daughter, though hers were framed with lines of worry that had deepened over the past year. "You're back later than I expected, Milli. Did you see Kaylin?" Milli nodded, lowering herself onto the edge of the rough-hewn table near the hearth. "Yeah, we talked for a bit near Cloudspire." She paused, staring into the flickering flames, before letting out a heavy sigh. "We talked about the competition too, you know. The one I missed." Alara glanced over at her, her expression becoming serious. She squeezed out the cloth, then set it aside, folding her hands in her lap. "Milli, we've been through this before. You know why you couldn't go." "I know, Mama. I know. But—" Milli trailed off, struggling to find the words. Her frustration bubbled up again, and she wrung her hands in her lap. "I just feel like I missed my chance. If I'd been there, maybe I could have been chosen. Maybe I could have been the one heading north instead of Jace Stormholt, with everyone in town talking about my name. Instead, I'm here, looking after horses, while he's off being celebrated. Elara sighed, the weight of years of struggle and sacrifice behind the sound. I understand how you feel, truly. But this is our life, Milli. Your father's illness. It's been hard on all of us. But our horses are what put food on this table and keep a roof over our heads. You were needed here. Milli's shoulders slumped, and she bit back the urge to argue. She knew her mother was right, but that didn't make it any easier to accept. I had a dream last night, she murmured, her voice quieter now, as if speaking the words too loudly would shatter them. I dreamed I found a way into Cloudspire. There was this hidden path, like a secret no one else knew, and it led me up to the city. I found these, I don't know, ancient secrets from the Skyfolk. Things that could help our family, help all of Skyreach Hold. They saw what I found, and it put our town on the map. People came from all over to see the things we discovered. We weren't struggling anymore, Mama. We were respected. Elara's face softened, a wistful smile tugging at her lips as she reached out and touched her daughter's hand. That's a lovely dream, Milli, and I'm glad you have it. But dreams are just that. Dreams. I know you've always felt drawn to those ruins, and to the stories of the Skyfolk. But they won't change what's real. And what's real is that we have to look after ourselves right here, right now. Milli's chest tightened, but she nodded, forcing herself to meet her mother's gaze. I know you're right. It's just, sometimes I wish things could be different. Elara's thumb brushed across the back of her daughter's hand, offering a quiet comfort. I know, love. But you're here and we're together. That's enough for now, isn't it? Milli swallowed back the lump in her throat and managed a small smile. Yeah, it is. Elara squeezed her hand one last time before turning back to her husband, adjusting the blanket over his shoulders. Milli watched them for a moment, her parents framed by the firelight, then slipped outside to let them rest. The air was cooler now, the sky above streaked with the last remnants of sunset, fading into a deep blue. Milli climbed the creaking wooden ladder up to the roof of their house, where she often sat to think. Up here, with the vastness of the sky around her, she felt like she could breathe a little easier. She settled onto the rough thatch, hugging her knees to her chest, and looked out over the darkening plateau. Far in the distance, she could just make out the silhouette of Cloudspire, its stone pillars barely visible against the night sky. A scattering of stars began to appear, twinkling faintly above the ancient city, as if they too were watching over the ruins. Milli stared at the shadowy outline, her mind drifting back to the dream she had shared with her mother. Maybe it was foolish to think she could change anything. Maybe she was just one girl in a place too small for anyone to notice. But somewhere, deep inside her, a stubborn hope refused to die. She closed her eyes and imagined herself walking through the halls of that ancient city, discovering secrets that had been lost for centuries. She imagined a life where she was more than just a girl taking care of her family's horses. A life where she made a difference, where she mattered. The wind picked up, ruffling her hair, and she drew her cloak tighter around her shoulders. She watched the stars until the cold drove her back inside, but as she climbed down the ladder and slipped into the warmth of her home, the dream of Cloudspire stayed with her, glowing softly in the back of her mind like the last ember of a fire.